Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome to another Beyond the Numbers podcast. I'm Chris Ortega, the CEO of Fresh FP&A, and I run a global fractional CFO and advisory service company called Fresh FP&A. Really excited about my conversation here today. Today, I'm going to be talking with Jill Mullens, who's a senior HR associate at EvolveHR. Today, we're going to be talking about harmonizing the partnership between HR and finance. And if this is your first time coming to a Beyond the Numbers podcast, basically I get with industry leaders in different areas outside of the finance organization. We talk about things around leadership, we talk about things around building great relationships, and I'm a steward of learning. So we get all these different great conversations with industry leaders, different markets, different functional areas, different parts of the business. So I'm super excited here today to be joined. Jill, introduce yourself to everybody.
Sure. Thank you, Chris. I'm really excited to join Chris. Chris and I have been talking about this opportunity to collaborate and how important that partnership between HR and finance really is. So I'm really excited to join. As Chris mentioned, I am senior HR consultant at Evolve HR Group. Had a number of different years of experience across multiple industries, small, medium, larger size organizations, even worked in education for a while. So I got a great perspective and looking forward to sharing some insight today with you all.
Yeah, thank you, Jill. And I know we've been planning to have this conversation a long time, so it's been long overdue. I'm super excited, but let's jump right into
Yeah.
it. So one of my first lead questions that I just want to set the context for, a lot of SMBs are small to medium sized businesses. They are crunched, and a lot of bigger organizations as well too are facing this challenge around talent retainment, talent attraction. So, Jill, my first question to you is, what are some aspects around talent and talent development and attraction and retention that HR and finance can partner together to help growing SMBs?
Yeah, I know. I think that's a really great question. I think there's kind of four thoughts that I have on this front. So first, I think intentionality is so important, and I've learned that throughout my career. And what do I mean by that? So I think a lot of SMBs are continuing to grow and evolve the culture, right? So they need to be really
Right.
intentional about putting things in place that align and that correspond to the values that they're either they have created or they're looking to create. The second kind of goes along with that. You have to be thoughtful about, you know, what do you need for your organization and how do you continue to retain that amazing talent that you have in place. I think the other two things kind of go hand in hand. You have to be really adaptable and really flexible, and definitely we'll talk more about those pieces too, but I think those are the four key ingredients. And then how we work together from an HR finance perspective, I know you and I will talk more about.
Yeah, Jill, I love and it kind of segues into my next portion because I think culture is such an important part of every organization, right? In my 20 years experience in accounting, finance, FP&A, and financial leadership, culture has always been one of those most important ways, right? And a lot of times in the office of the CFO in the finance organization, right? We're like the number people. We don't like the warm and fuzzies. And I think culture is a
Yeah.
really, really great area for finance, for CFOs to kind of come into the organization and help build that. So let's dive into your first element that you talked about in helping SMBs around growth, around this talent element. How can HR and finance partner together to create an all-star culture inside of SMB organizations?
Yeah, well, so there's a lot of different pieces to kind of go after here. I think some of it has to do with some of the functionality of working together with your finance partner in terms of headcount planning, right? You first started talking about attraction, right? So you need to work hand in hand to understand what are the needs of the organization, what type of business are we looking to fill in the future? What kinds of roles will we need? Just because we know what we have today doesn't mean that that's what we're going to need tomorrow. So being really thoughtful about understanding kind of the direction of the business and where we're going to be growing and the talent and the skills that we have in place today and what that will look like in the future. I think there are also some things that, we can align around goals. I think a lot about, as you're looking at the challenges across the business, is this a people or a process issue? And sometimes it's both, right? So sometimes some of those needs and those opportunities to kind of grow start with people and being able to bring in people to fill those needs. And some of it's process. Maybe we need better technology. Maybe we're struggling to be efficient and effective at what we're doing, and we need help from a technological perspective. So I think a lot of it's working together from an HR and finance perspective to kind of understand what's going on in the business and how do we work together to improve some of the challenges, because we want people to feel good about the roles that they play, understand the expectations and how they fit into the culture and how they help to drive the business. And then we also want to provide them with tools so that they feel like they have, the best access to the things that help them to be more effective and efficient and help them to use their skills in the best ways.
Yeah, Jill, I love that aspect, how you broke it down from the people and the process and technology side. I always look at it, and when I look at the 6 key pillars of financial transformation, right, there's really the first 3 of the foundation pillars. That's going to be your people, that's going to be your processes, and that's going to be the partnerships that you have inside the organization. And no better place. And this is where I challenge all my CFOs, finance leaders that are going to go back and look at this and say, we do have a direct role in driving the culture of organizations, right? We just don't, typically when you think of the office of the CFO, you think of financial professionals, right? You probably think of us as like the Excel people. We're really great at Excel and we're over in the back of the corner of the organization. We don't really come out. We don't really communicate. I remember in leading high growth organizations that one of the first things I always did, and when I would come into work, when this was back going into work, right? This is a whole nother background, right?
Yeah.
But I would always come in and just interact with people, right? I would interact. I would go meet with people. I would go communicate. I would go sit in meetings that were outside of finance, right? So my challenge to all those CFOs going back and looking at these practical steps is go find a way to entrench yourself in the culture, right? Entrench yourself in learning the sales culture, learning the HR culture, learning the operations culture, because I think that's another element to talk about. A lot of departments have different cultures inside of their department, right? So it's like the larger business culture, but it's also the larger culture inside the individual teams as well too. So I think for me, like that's really important for us to think about as we go and be culture like culture carriers inside the business.
Right. No, I totally agree. Well, and go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, as you see this, the second aspect that you talked about was identifying those needs. And you kind of talked a little bit about this before, right? What are some of those in your expertise and your experience in working with SMBs and working inside of organizations? What are some of those critical, like, HR needs that you think most SMB businesses have and that are facing now?
Yeah, I think sometimes they're experiencing such a high level of growth that it's hard to keep up. And so I think a couple things happen that I've seen in the past. And one is that you're hiring so quickly and so fast that you're not going to always get it right, right? So again, I think that goes back to some of the things I said earlier about kind of that intentionality, understanding and being thoughtful about here's what our culture is, here are the values that we have, and making sure that you integrate that into all of your your selection criteria and your process around that you integrate that into your job descriptions and how you're describing the role and setting those expectations. I think sometimes as we see organizations grow and continue to evolve, we see times where positions outgrow the people, right? And it happens. I mean, it's nothing against the person or the company. It just, the position outgrows the person, because I think a lot of times what you'll see happen is a smaller organization, you have people wearing multiple different hats, right? And as you grow as an organization, it's important to kind of think about how you continue to specialize and how people grow into those roles. And then I think that the rate at which things are changing, sometimes folks are comfortable with that and sometimes they're not. So you have to move through that process with people and determine, where I've worked with organizations, maybe the person was like one of the first 10 people hired, right? And so they're used to, remember back in the day when we used to do these things, but the culture has evolved and it's changed over time as the organization has grown. So helping to kind of navigate some of those things that happen just naturally can be really challenging. So you just have to keep those things in mind as you're growing and making sure you're watching out for all those pieces.
Yeah, I think I loved your point around like change. Like change is a constant in growing businesses, right? And for me, I think when SMB leaders, CEOs, owners, and founders of these businesses, there's always that reflection point. Like I've been in part of startups to scale ups to, building companies and exiting them out. And that culture changes as you get to different stages of business. And Jill, I really love your point where you talk about sometimes you outgrow the role, right? There's been plenty of times in my professional career, looking back on an experience that I had, I was at a software company, I was leading the finance organization, and I was really looking for more of that international exposure. I was looking for more of that international leadership. I wanted to dive out into bigger aspects. And I realized, and this was a tough conversation that I had with my manager at the time. He's still a great mentor of mine. Shout out to Chris Landis. You're still my guy. But I remember Jill having this conversation with him, and we had the conversation. He told me about, what the business could provide, what they could do. And at the end, Jill, we ultimately arrived at, Chris, man, this isn't the right opportunity for you. Like, you have way more ambitions.
Right.
There's things in the business that we can't give you. And it was the first time in my career, Jill, I remember sitting back and saying, man, this is so refreshing for us both to know that, hey, Chris, how can I help
Right.
empower you to find that opportunity? Because it's not going to be here. And sometimes you got to have those tough conversations. And this is where I think that partnership
You
between
do.
HR and finance becomes really, really, really important, because you may be thinking, and a lot of times I see SMB people and SMB leaders thinking about the roles that they need now, right? They're looking to fill the role for the pains, the
Right.
frustrations, the challenges of their current business. But you got to take that a
Right.
step further, because you got to be thinking about how does that role evolve? And I think career advancement, I think leadership development, professional training, these are all aspects that you got to think about. And Jill, I loved how you articulated sometimes you just outgrow the space that you're at, and that's okay.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I think as an HR person, you're right. I mean, I think we have to have those types of conversations with people and feel comfortable in that coaching. You talked about how important kind of that professional development is. Everyone is responsible for their own growth and development. I think a company can come alongside you and they can help kind of give you ideas about what a path or what a development approach could look like, but you have to own that and you have to drive that. And you have to know yourself and you have to know what your capabilities are. I mean, believe me, I've been in plenty of roles of growth and of stretch. And, I think I've joined organizations that are like, just what you said, hey, we think right now we need you to do this and we need these things from you, Jill. But when I got in there, I was like, oh, no, no. Like, you need all of these things and we're going to have to go over here. So we're going to have to figure out all these things together. Right. And so kind of like that's cool. I'm like, yeah, I can do that. But we also need to do these other things too. And I think, I will say that, being in the HR space, that's a challenge, right? Because you're sometimes, expected to be a, tactical magician, right? And get all these things done in the background that people see. But then you're also expected to have this like amazing strategic mindset that can read what's happening in the future in a crystal ball, right? And so that can be really daunting and challenging. So and at least you have your finance partner that can kind of come in and at least give you some of those um, hey, here's my predictions, here's my models, here's what I think is going to happen, is where I think we're going to go. So at least you have some partnership in that, because I'm sure, Chris, you've probably had to pull out your crystal ball and figure out, hey, where are we going to be as an organization in 5-10 years from now, right?
So. Absolutely, Jill. I feel like I need to have a crystal ball that I show up here. Like, for all those going back and looking at this video, here's my finance crystal ball right here, right? But yeah, Jill, you're exactly right. And I think this is where, going into like the next kind of segue that I want to talk about, this is the advantage that a lot of SMB businesses have, right? Like, this is always my caveat when I work with SMB business owners and, in high growth industries that are looking to grow and scale, looking to go into new markets. This is like the fractional advantage of bringing on a fractional CFO at Fresh FP&A,
sure.
or bringing on fractional HR leadership. And I always say, like, it's important very early stages of your business, of your growth, of your life cycle of your organization, to bring in people with this expertise, skills, passion, and knowledge to help you grow and expand. So one of the things I want to talk to you about is, when you're looking at an SMB company, right? What are some of those advantages from an HR perspective in bringing on that fractional leadership early on in their business model?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is providing kind of that high level expert leadership without having to hire kind of that full-time person, right? That comes with the financial burden of paying someone benefits and all of those things, right? Like, so that's one piece of it. But then I think they can kind of be thinking about things strategically and offering support. It's that futuristic look, right? Like, what are we? I think a lot of SMBs, they don't know what they don't know, right? So bringing in some of that expertise and understanding of the things that they need to be thinking about at each and every stage of the business. One of the things that I'm working on right now is, like, what should HR look like from 1 to 100 employees? Because I think there's different milestones that you hit and different points where you are going to need different things as an SMB business owner. And so thinking about that ahead of time, I think too often you hear, oh gosh, you need a great accountant and you need a great lawyer. Well, sure, those things are totally true. But then more and more I'm hearing people say, well, we have these great, but we're starting to get HR type questions, and they're like, whoa, we don't do HR, right? And so I think sometimes it's too late. So thinking about it early, even before you think you need it, you probably need it. So.
Jill, that's great insight. And if I would just add from the finance perspective, right? I think what you're talking about is similar to us. In all the high growth organizations that I've been able to build, shape, scale, and exit, there's like 3 key roles as a CEO that you need in that shop, right? You need a great finance person, you need a great HR person, and you need a great salesperson. Like, when I look back through of some of the great organizations that I've worked with, some of the best organizations that we built and scaled, that's what we had in place. We had a great leader, we had great HR, we had a great finance person, me and my team, right? And then we had a great sales leader, right? And to me, early in your business, it's about building those foundations, right? Those foundations are so important inside of your business. The foundation of your finance foundation, the foundation of your people operations foundation, right? The foundation of your sales, your commercial, your marketing. Those are critical foundations that SMBs, a lot of times, right? You look at the common profile of a CEO, business owner, or founder at an SMB company, right? They're probably either going to be sales focused, they're going to be product focused, or they come with just tremendous passion in a certain area. They don't have that expertise, right? And most CEOs, owners, and founders that we come across and clients that we bring on at Fresh FP&A, they absolutely hate the finance side. They're like, Chris, finance is not my expertise. I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm seeking that strategic partner that give us the financial clarity and confidence that I need to continue to grow the business. And to me, those foundations around finance, around people, and around the commercial side of your growing business, that's essential. I always look at it as like a house, right? Imagine your company is your house, and you're building out these foundations.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to go back through and realize 10 years later after building your house that you have some creaks in that concrete or the foundation isn't as sturdy. The time, energy, effort, and resources that you have to go back through to fix that foundation, it becomes way more costly. So for me, that's where I see that fractional advantage that you can partner with EvolveHR, you can partner with Fresh FP&A, or you can partner with these organizations to bring you
Right.
both that strategic level leadership, but that tactical execution. So you know you're building the best foundations inside of your growing company. So, Jill, I love that aspect of it. And to
Right.
me, one of the things you talked about, and I want to dive in a little bit deeper on that playbook, because like that made my eyes pop up. When you think about, like, not going into details, but when you think about that roadmap of going from 10 to 25 to 50 to 100 employees, what are some of the common pitfalls that you've seen SMB leaders make from the people operations perspective?
Oh, that's a great question, and some of this too, I'm learning as I go, right? Because I'm seeing some of it as I'm out and working with different organizations. But I think a lot of it is just I don't need someone. We can handle this. It's not a full-time role that I need. I can, I can just engage with maybe a PEO and they'll handle all of it, so I don't have to deal with any of it. And I think sometimes there are some situations, especially when you're really small, where some of that works. But I think if you start to outsource too much of that, then you're letting someone else drive your culture, right? And so you need to be really thoughtful about, it goes back to the four things I mentioned earlier. It's intentionality, it's thoughtfulness, it's adaptability, it's flexibility, right? And too often, okay, I need to figure out how to do payroll and get people paid, and that's all I really care about. Well, that's a part of it, right? But it's not all of it. I think there's so many common pitfalls. And then, there are times when you hit certain numbers where you have to, a 50 employee company and a 100 employee company are going to be required to comply with certain standards and things across, maybe from a national perspective or federal perspective to a state perspective. And there's just so much evolving and changing landscape that keeping track of all of that on your own while, like you said, you're trying to do your day job and the thing that you're the best at, it's not wise. So it's best to kind of have an expert come in and help you, and then help you determine, when is it time for me to pass that off and, give it to that internal person to handle from a full-time day-to-day perspective. So lots of thoughts there.
Absolutely. And Jill, I appreciate those insights. And a lot of what I think echoes to what you just said, that we approach from the finance perspective is similar, right? A lot of times when we're working with SMB organizations, what I sit down with the CEOs, the business owners, the founders of these growing companies is say, this is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to help set the vision, the strategy, the tactics, the metrics, the milestone and execution plan that your organization needs, right? And when you're a 10-person organization, that's a lot different than when you're a 250-person organization. And one of the common, I think, pitfalls I see from the finance perspective is once you start growing as an organization and you start moving in more complexity inside your organization, you're probably moving up in market. Most CEOs, owners, and founders at SMB growing businesses, they rely so much on their gut instinct, right? They rely so much on this feels right. Like, I think this is right. And that is where you need that level of sophistication to say, hey, we don't need to rest on our gut feelings. Gut feelings is like, hell, who knows that? Let's become more data-driven inside of our organization. Let's make sure that we're making the right decision. And also, let's make sure we're making the right decision, not because of the loudest voice in the room. A lot of times you may have that salesperson, that loudest voice in the room, and a lot of the opportunities and initiatives and projects that the business wants to do, it's because they're the best talking person, right? So as you continue to grow and you continue to scale, the level of leadership, the level of sophistication, and the level of data and what you utilize to make actionable decisions becomes a lot more valuable, and the stakes become bigger. So definitely having that framework and working with HR leaders like Jill and EvolveHR to help you set that roadmap, so to speak, is like, hey, here's where you're at now, here's where you want to be, and here's how we're going to set the vision, the strategy, the tactics, the metric, and milestones and execution for you to get there. And having that resource, having that expertise, having that knowledge, having that passion at a fraction of the cost of what you can have for that full-time resource, it becomes like a no-brain decision. Like, why would you not do that, right?
For sure. For sure.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the other things I want to we talked about, the culture aspect of it. You gave some great examples of how finance and HR can come together. We dove into the SMB side for that fractional advantage that a lot of SMBs can tap into, that skills, passions, talents. I want to go into another area, right? This is about future proofing your journey. And I don't think we can have a conversation without HR and finance where we don't talk about technology, right? So my question to you, Jill, is what role do you think technology
Oh, absolutely.
plays in that growing SMB business? And how can leaders tap into some of that technology expertise to help them grow and scale?
Ooh, great question. So I've always been a fan of both what I call high touch and high tech, right? I think from a people perspective, you still have to have those human touch points in that interaction. But I think from a high tech perspective, you have to, it's like what I said earlier, you have to give people tools to be more efficient, effective at their jobs, and to kind of take over. We all have those things that are just burdensome and administrative and that we hate to do, right? So I think, I'm finding from an HR perspective that the AI that's out there right now is really increasing our tactical efficiency by relieving us of some of that administrative burden that we felt in the past, right? And so why not continue to utilize those types of tools to help us to be more effective, more efficient, so that we can spend time kind of doing more of those high touch things and more of those strategic and thoughtful things, and giving ourselves the white space to do that we haven't had before, right? Because again, I think it goes back to some of the things that I said earlier, especially with HR professionals. I think we get caught up in this sort of tactical, like just guinea pig wheel, right? Like we're just doing things, doing things all the time, doing things, but we're not really thinking about how what we're doing today and the time that we're spending today is impacting what is going to happen in the future, right? Or how we're developing that strategy for the future. So I think, AI gives us that opportunity to spend more time on the more important, high impact things.
Yeah, and both of us, right? We sit in that general and administrative function. So both of us, we're supporting the business.
Mm-hmm.
Finance is supporting the business, HR
Yep.
supporting the business, legal supports the business. So we are team G&A, general and administrative, right? And the only way, and looking back, and even working with our CEOs and business owners and founders that we work with, finance and HR are typically one of those places. As the business grows and scales, you grow double digits year over year. You invest a lot more in sales. You invest a
Mm-hmm.
lot more in marketing. You go get that head count. And those functions, they get the resources that they need in a growing business, but they also get the technology that we need. I don't know about you, Jill, but in the organizations that I've worked in, the finance teams that I've led, when we were growing triple and double digits year over year, I never got unlimited headcount. I could go higher, right? I was always, I always had
No,
I always
no.
was in the
Yeah,
mindset of I had to do more with the same amount of people that I had. Like I had to do more. And
with
this is
less.
where technology
Mm-hmm.
enablement and adoption becomes a superpower for us, right? And it gets to the point that
Mm-hmm.
you exactly talked about. It
Right.
gets us outside of the tactical, low value, manual, routine things that finance and HR professionals
Mm-hmm.
do. And it now gives us the capacity to do a more of that strategic level value to the organization, which is communication, collaboration, building community, and building connection inside the business. That's where we have the most value. And we talked about it earlier, looking into that crystal ball, the only way that I think finance professionals are able to make that leap from being scorekeepers and doing a lot of this manual low value work to being valued advisors and being technology evangelists is we have to become comfortable with technology. And of course, Gen AI is like the biggest thing across the board that a lot of technology, a lot of functions are starting to utilize. But that's how we scale. It's actually one of the scaling pillars that we have around financial transformation at Fresh FP&A, right? I talked about this earlier. That foundation of your finance organization, people, process, partnerships, you need that foundation. The first pillar, the first scaling pillar from a finance organization is platforms. This is the technology. This is the budgeting planning technology. This is the AR technology. This is AP technology. That's how we scale, and that's how we produce more value to the organization. But we got to jump in and we got to learn these technologies.
Right. Absolutely. So important. I mean, I think of all of the manual processes and spreadsheets and tracking and things that I've done in the past in my career that are automated today. And I'm like, man, this would have been great like 10 years ago, right?
Yeah, it is. And it's crazy when you see that level of adoption and evolution that technology's had in such a short amount of time. Like, we're not talking. And just for math for everybody, like ChatGPT, Bart, Gemini, Claude, all these different large language models, these generative AI models, they've only been around for a couple years, right? We're not talking about these technologies been around for 10 years. And look at the level of evolution and how these technologies has evolved so much, right? That to me is where I get really excited because finance and HR that are technology enabled, that are open to adopting technology, that's a whole nother value proposition. Now you combine that with the experience, the skills, the passion, all this experience that we have, and now we're able to accelerate our value proposition by leveraging technology, and we're able to provide this to growing SMB businesses early in their life cycle. Man, this is where it gets really exciting.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. That's a whole topic for another day, Chris. We could talk more about that.
Absolutely, that is. Hey, Jill, one last thing I want to talk about is when we talk about this future proof, and you kind of mentioned on this earlier, what kind of role does resiliency play in that partnership between HR and finance in serving SMB businesses?
That's a good question. Um, I mean, I think probably, if anything, most recently taught us that lesson was COVID, right? Like, I mean, you're going to face so many ups and downs, whether it be, industry driven, whether it be, like a pandemic, whether it be, there's all these different variables that you're going to, and challenges that you're going to come up against that you didn't plan for, right? That you didn't have a contingency for. So I think you really have to be, resilient. You really have to be, I like what you said earlier about like partnerships and collaboration. Like, you really have to have these great relationships and be able to have open dialogue and conversations. I was actually just talking with my mom this morning about this. Like, I think so much of what I've learned over my career is like, I have a vision in mind of like how I want my day to go, how I want something to work out, how I'm going to work through a situation. Does it ever happen the way that I want it to, or the way that I plan it to? No. So like, I have to become comfortable and okay with that, and to be able to continue to move on and get through that. Right. So I mean, I just had to tell myself that today. So it's a constant lesson.
Absolutely. And I think putting on my CEO hat, so me taking my CFO hat off and serving the business, that has been, I think, one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in the 3 years of building Fresh FP&A is resiliency and being able. I think it comes back to like my boxing days when I used to be a boxer, right? When I used to fight, one thing that boxing has taught me, and it's become a superpower of mine, is boxing taught me the level of being calm, cool, and collective when chaos is happening, right? So when chaos is happening, I always found a way to keep a common baseline. And translating that over to building Fresh FP&A, that has been one of the biggest, I think, lessons that I've had to learn is you're going to constantly have difficulties, challenge, opportunities, positive wins. But to me, it's about keeping that baseline of how do you stay focused? How do you not let the highs be so high and the lows be so low, but you keep a common, consistent baseline as you're going through and building your business? And for SMB CEOs, business owners, and founders that are going back and through and looking at this, resiliency in your organization, a lot of that confidence that you'll get having that resiliency, it comes from the leaders that you have in place. It comes from having a great strategic CFO partner to help you lead with financial clarity and confidence, right? It comes from having a great HR partner like Jill and Evolve HR to make sure you're developing the right culture, you're developing the right processes, and you're driving a people-led organization. So to me, I think like those are really, really key fundamental blocks in terms of building that resiliency inside of your journey.
Well, and you have to be willing to give yourself some grace too, right? And not be afraid to ask for help, right? You, like we said, you're not going to know everything, and you're
Yeah.
not going to be the expert in everything. And it's okay to reach out, to need that expertise, that support, that help, and to admit that you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah, that's one of I think that's one of the biggest things, right? And when I like taking that and having that humility and just saying like, for me as example, I'm not the best like I'm pretty good at sales and marketing, but I'm not like the best at it. Like I'm not like I didn't go to school for it. I don't have 20 plus years in building marketing organizations. So I know that I can only scale my knowledge in a certain area so much, right? Then once you get to that point, then it becomes an opportunity cost, right? Now you're investing this extra time, energy, and effort into developing, maybe it's marketing or maybe it's HR, maybe it's finance, right? And as a leader, now you have that opportunity trade-off because now that time, energy, and effort can be focused on building a better product, which is where you're passionate about, or building a better sales organization, or building a better go-to-market strategy. So that's where that leadership and that expertise becomes really an accelerator for you, is because now you say, okay, I've got
Right.
Fresh FP&A in place. I've got Evolve HR to handle our finance, to handle our people operations. I feel really great about the leadership. I love our communication. I love the partnership that we have. My stress that SMB CEO, owner, or founder, that stress level goes down, that clarity, that confidence that you have now that repositions you to go focus on
Right.
the passionate areas inside of your business that you want to focus on. So, Jill, I think you have really highlighted and really stamped the fact that bringing on that leadership early on is super important as you continue to grow.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
All right. Yeah, yeah. Hey, Jill, I really love this conversation. I know, like, if people want to learn more about you, if they want to connect with you, if they want to look at this playbook that you're building from 0 to 100 real quick, shout out to Drake. Shout out to Drake. That's my Drake comment. We're going 0 to 100 real quick. But if they want to learn more about you,
I like
Jill,
that.
where can they connect with you? Where can they learn? Give some more information about how they connect with you and partner with Evolve HR.
Yeah. So involvehrgroup.com. So that's our website. Feel free to kind of check us out there. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Jill, and it's Mullens. A lot of people want to say INS, but feel free to reach out. Happy to share my thoughts. I think I love that 0 to 100. I'm going to use that. I like that Drake comment. Maybe I'll
There
figure
you
out how to
go.
build that
There you
into
go.
kind of my deck on that front. So I like that.
There you go. Hey, Jill, thank you so much for your time. And for
Mhm.
all the viewers, the listeners, everybody going back, playing through this, Thank you for watching to this point. If you've seen a lot of value from this conversation, make sure to click that like button. Make sure to hit that subscribe button to our channel as well if you're watching this on YouTube. That way you don't miss any other Beyond the Numbers podcast. Thank you again, Jill, for your time, for your insights. I was sitting here taking notes and got a lot of great things. Thank you for watching. And as I always end, keep pushing, never settle, and the best is yet to come. Let's get it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jill.